everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, Scott and I are excited to have a conversation about something we're both deeply passionate about: the power and importance of intergenerational collaboration.
Across education, industry, and community, we're seeing that when different generations come together, bringing their diverse skills, experience, and fresh ideas, that's when real innovation happens. It's not about one generation leading and another one following, it's about learning with and from each other.
Through our own work together, including co founding the Future of Education Summit, we've seen firsthand just how transformative these collaborations can be. And today, we want to share some of our experiences, the lessons we've learned, and ideas on how we can all harness the strength of every generation.
And of course, we'll be asking each other some big questions along the way because the best conversations happen when everyone is still learning from each other. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, Meagan, I wanted to start with a question from you because we've been working together for a number of years now on the Future of Education Summit and a number of other collaborations. For myself as a Gen Z, yourself as a Gen X, we bring very different perspectives to the table. But we've been able to build a really dynamic intergenerational collaboration, I would say, where we learn from each other, we share ideas, but I think it's always grounded in that mutual trust and respect for each other. I'd love to hear, though, from your experiences leading in education. How have you seen the value of different generations working together, and how has that changed over time?
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. I definitely think over time that I've witnessed what I would call a significant shift in how intergenerational collaboration is valued more so than anything. Early in my career, I think generational differences were sometimes seen as barriers. You might have had newer teachers viewed as inexperienced, but experienced teachers were somehow sort of, I guess, represented as people that were resistant to change. However, I think that there's been a really positive shift here, and there's a growing recognition that the strengths of each generation is not only valid, but it's really essential. So, I guess what I think has changed is the intentionality around fostering collaboration across our generations. So, our schools are increasingly creating structures that value shared learning, that value peer mentoring, that value things like co-teaching, professional learning communities. Here at Canterbury, we call it our communities of practice. And this encourages dialogue rather than hierarchy. So I guess what I think is most important, and we should all think the thing that is most important, is that students benefit most when our staff bring diverse perspectives together. I think that's the key answer there, Scott. It's that what we're looking for is to make sure that multi-generational teamwork is actually considered a strategic asset.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think at the end of the day, we all come from such different backgrounds and such different experiences. I mean, if you look at any staff room today, you'll see 4 or 5 different generations working together, and all of them come with different approaches, different experiences, and different ways of doing things. And I know even from my own experiences working with yourself and other innovative educators from different generations, there is so much that can be gained from that open dialogue, that, I guess, that willingness to learn, but also that willingness to share as well.
Definitely. Probably leads into our next question, Scott, that I've got for you, because you spend a lot of time working with young innovators and industry leaders. I'm really curious, how do you see generational differences as a strength rather than a challenge?
Look, that's a great question. And I think for me, as part of my role, I'm really fortunate. Half my time I get to spend in classrooms working with primary and high school students across the country and around the world, talking to them about, well, look, when you're considering your future and your pathway and your career, what are you looking for out of an employer? And then on the flip side, the other half of my time, I get to spend working with executives and CEOs from big organizations around the world, helping them figure out how they're attracting that next generation of top talent and approaching the workforce of the future. And I think it's really difficult, if I'm being really honest, for a lot of leaders these days. I go into a lot of teams and a lot of boardrooms where you've got the baby boomers giving Gen Z a lot of flack for being that tech obsessed generation that want instant gratification and those constant dopamine hits. And I think on the flip side, you see those Gen Zs rolling their eyes and saying, okay, boomer, I dare you to convert a Word document to a PDF on your laptop. it can create a lot of friction.
Mm.
But I think at the end of the day, when we see teams coming together, creating that mutual trust and mutual respect, you get some really great outcomes. And I look at Estee Lauder as a really great example of this. They have a reverse mentoring program. And that concept of reverse mentoring is where you pair a senior executive with a junior staff member for learning opportunities. But the idea of reverse mentoring is it goes both ways. That senior executive has got so much knowledge and so much wisdom they can share from decades in the industry, but at the same time, I think that junior employee, where their opinions might have been discounted, their knowledge might have been brushed to the side, they've got such a different way of thinking when it comes to our increasingly digital world. And they've got lots of different insights they can share into uses of technology, innovative approaches to things, and just different ways of doing things. So I think when you create those opportunities within your team to have that learning go both ways across the generation, you get a breakdown of silos, you get a really strong culture within your team, but you also get really out of the box solutions that are innovative yet impactful. They're pushing the boundary, they're thinking big, thinking different, thinking outside of the box, but also they're grounded in what has worked and what works for the industry, what's worked in the past, and all of that experience that comes with those more seasoned professionals.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that is so powerful. That whole concept of the reverse, did you call it the reverse mentor? Yeah, I love that because I think you can see that every day. And certainly as a school leader, I value so much the mentorship that comes from not only my colleagues that are younger generations who share lots of, I think, innovative ideas, yes, but also just different ways of viewing something. That perspective piece is so important. But of course, I'm lucky enough to get student perspective as well. And that's really powerful.
Absolutely. And I think it's just creating those opportunities for people to share their ideas and share their opinions. And I think you definitely see some cultures and some communities where, unfortunately, the younger people on the team and even students don't feel like they have that opportunity to
Yeah.
share their voice and have that agency. But I think when a leader creates that really open culture and that really open and authentic, I think, dialogue, saying, well, look, I'd love to hear what you think. And no opinion and no idea is stupid and invalid. I think that's when you get the best ideas because people feel comfortable and confident coming forward with their thoughts.
Definitely.
Now, Meagan, my next question for you is looking at a school setting. I'd love to know where you've seen examples of what this looks like, where students and older generations, whether it's teachers or alumni or community, are coming together to collaborate on different projects. Because I know you've had a pretty extensive career across different schools, across states, and across sectors. Yeah, where have you seen these different generations coming together to work on projects, initiatives, and ideas together?
Yeah, great. I appreciate you saying extensive career and not that you're old. So well done. Um, and I have seen look, I've seen loads. I've seen so many really cool collaborations, and particularly over the past, probably five years. I've seen a lot of these happening. Um, I guess one of my favorites was a cross generational mentorship initiative. And it was within an entrepreneurship program. So we had alumni who returned and they guided students through real world projects, offered business insights and life lessons, of course. But our students then had an opportunity to bring fresh and innovative ideas, and their mentors help them shape these into viable plans, because I think that's a big thing. You can come up with an idea, but what does that look like as a plan? For me, what was really powerful was the fact that it wasn't transactional. It was really transformational. And I know you hear me talk about that all the time. I talk about transformative service and I talk about transformative programs, but this one absolutely was that. I guess the other thing is feedback from that was that both groups actually expressed how much they learned from each other. And I think that's really powerful. I've seen an exceptional program that I loved at a previous school that I worked in, and that was one where the students were actually working with staff, in fact, to come up with an idea, and it was a service project, but it was an opportunity for them to build something in their school that then future generations would be able to explore, and it was done under as part of a curriculum program. So I guess there are two that I really loved. But for me, I guess when I think about, and obviously thought through it, I could think up a few more to share, but they would all highlight the same thing, and that's basically the richness that emerges when our generations collaborate. but it's got to be with purpose, Scott. Like, it can't just be trying to squeeze it into a curriculum idea that you already had. It's really got to be something that's purposeful. When they can see that, then our students feel empowered and they feel heard and they feel connected. And it has to be something larger than themselves. And I think that's lots of schools are doing really exciting work in this space. But I think we have to remember that wisdom and innovation are not at odds at all, that they're actually really powerful if you can push them to work together.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely for students when they see that authenticity is there, it's more than just a box ticking exercise or more than just a photo opportunity to say, oh yeah, we consulted with young people, we got their voice, but we're not going to listen to it. When they can see that it is meaningful, they really do take that opportunity and run with it. But I'd love to know from your perspective with these projects, how did you go engaging the teachers, the alumni, the community, though, in that process? Because I guess for young people, they're excited. They've got a lot of ideas, but when it came to sort of selling it to, those teachers and alumni, how did you go about it and getting them on board?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it depends on your context a lot. For me, it's looked quite different in the last couple of contexts that I've had. But I think that alumni is a little easier. Alumni tend to be pretty keen, pretty energetic. They're ready to come in. They want to give back, particularly if they're at a certain, a couple of years out, not generally the first year or two, but a couple of years out, they're starting to get really motivated. And I think they come back. And that comes down to who's driving a lot of these programs. And you've got to have somebody who is pretty relentless in contacting people and a really good communicator and making sure that those connections are there. In terms of the staff projects that I've seen, and potentially also projects that are outside of our staff, and it might be collaborating with industry, and you and I have done lots of those together. I think that also comes down to, look, it can be a bit of a drip feed at first. I think it's a bit of that show not tell as such, like do a small version of it, show people how it can look, show people what it feels like, so as that they can sort of think, okay, well, yeah, I feel really comfortable and safe to get involved in that. That looks really fun. I think if you go in telling people the benefits and telling people what they should be doing, it feels a bit lecture-like and they're less likely to come on board. So I would always say do the show, don't tell.
Absolutely. And I think it really is that it's taking them on the journey. And I think that's in any setting where you're getting people that don't necessarily work with young people on a day-to-day basis and getting them engaged. You do have to do a bit of that piece where you're making sure that they're engaging in the right way, they're communicating in the right way. Because at the end of the day, we really do want to be supporting our young people and really lifting them up. And I think giving them the opportunity to come, they see it for themselves. You just can't put a price on that. And it's a really hard one to bottle, is that energy that's in the room, the real excitement within the young people and the impact of those ideas. So it's always about getting them in and modeling it first.
Definitely. All right, so let's switch it up on you. BOP Industries, a part of your mantra, what you do is champion youth-led innovation. It's a huge part of what you're proud of to represent at BOP, I know. So I guess I'm curious about, how do you encourage older generations to trust and invest in the young people's ideas?
Look, that's a really great question. And it's been interesting to see, I guess, the response from the older generations and how that's transformed over the past 10 years since I started my work at BOP. And I think what I find really fascinating is older generations, they are starting to realize that Gen Z and Gen Alpha, we really do need to be paying attention to them because they form a massive part of our communities. And in Australia alone, we've got 4 million Gen Zs and nearly 4 million Gen Alphas. So collectively, that's about 8 million people. That's a third of our Australian population. So
Yeah.
I think as they're getting older, the oldest Gen Zs, they're 30 years old now. They are in industry, they're leading teams, they're making impact and they're leading these projects. And I think a lot of those older generations that might have been potentially a little bit more resistant, I think you've always got that bell curve. You have those early adopters, those really forward-thinking progressive leaders like yourself that are on the front foot out there engaging with young people because they want to. But then you definitely have those laggards that you're sort of dragging along, kicking and screaming. And I think they're really starting to realize that whether we like it or not, we don't have a choice. These generations, they make up a massive portion of our community and we do need to listen to what they think. But I think for me, when it comes to engaging with some of those older generations and helping them understand those younger people's ideas and the value of them, it's around helping them navigate this innovation economy we live in. There is no question that our world is changing and it's changing fast. And I think for all of us, we have to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, whether you're a team leader, whether you're leading an organization, whether you're an educator preparing your young people for the future. We have to do that crystal ball gazing and say, well, look, what does our world look like in the next 5, 10, 15, 20
Yeah.
years? How are new and emerging technologies like AI, extended reality, robotics, the metaverse, how is that going to change my practice? How is that going to change the way I do my job? And at the end of the day, the best person to answer those questions, the best person to help us prepare for the future is the young people that are building that future. It's those digital natives that don't know a world without Wi-Fi, touchscreen devices, or social media, because they really do think about technology in such different ways. So I think when it comes to talking to those older generations, it's making sure that you're reiterating, and we're reiterating, that young people do form a massive part of our population, and they are going to be in our classrooms, they're in our communities, they're in our teams. So we need to make sure that as leaders, we're differentiating our approaches to involve them in the process. But also, too, it's saying, well, look, if you are a little bit nervous and unsure about what our future is going to look like, let's talk to our next generation, because they're the ones building that future. They're the ones championing change. And if we want innovative, future-focused ideas, our young people are where that's going to come from.
Yeah, I love that. I was just up at a conference on the Sunshine Coast, and there was a great panel. There was lots of interesting people in it, lots of educational leaders, but there was 2 students on the panel, and my goodness, like, their insight and their reflection and all of the things that they were saying, you could sort of look around the room and see people, really impressed and possibly a little shocked at how articulate they were and how clear they were about their direction and their passion. So you're right. I think we've still got work to do, right? We've still got a lot of time to embed this into our practice, particularly in schools, of listening to our young people, whether that's our younger generation of teaching staff or whether that's our students. I think that there's so much, there's power in it.
Absolutely. But I think, as you said, as part of the introduction, it's a bit of give and a bit of take. I don't think it's one generation throwing out everything we've always done to cater to the incoming generations. And on the flip side, I don't think it's telling young people they need to adapt to the way we've always done it. I think it's every generation having a little bit of give and adapting slightly to be able to form really impactful collaborations. And I think that's really the way forward. And every generation needs to understand that. We've all got a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
Now, Meagan, I'd love to understand the barriers, I guess, that you might have seen. Because I think intergenerational collaborations, they're great when they work. And I think, as we've seen, when you bring 2 different generations together, you can get some really impactful and innovative ideas. But I wanted to talk about some of the challenges and some of those barriers, because it's not always smooth sailing. And I know for yourself, as someone that has led teams of all different shapes and sizes in schools across the country, you would have seen, I guess, maybe some barriers in different traditional institutions like schools and in the education system more broadly. What are some of those barriers that you do see? And have you found any strategies to sort of work around those that some of our educators watching might be able to utilize in their teams?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think that you're naive to not call it out straight away. It's time. No matter what the question is, when you say barrier and education and teachers, it's time. It's time, it's work intensification, it's workload. They are always the most significant barrier in a school environment. Like, you only have to go, you can go into any school. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter what context. Teachers are stretched. And I guess the thing is, when you're looking at something like collaboration, and particularly looking for collaboration across generations, it requires really intentional time for relationship building. That takes time, and shared planning and reflection, and all of those things are time intensive. And so you really need to consider that. How are you actually going to build time into a timetable? How are you going to build time into meeting plans or professional learning experiences, and not just think that teachers can add this on as another thing to do? It's not possible. You and I talk about it all the time. If something comes in, something has to come out. And that's a real challenge. It's a real challenge in schools, but I think that it's worth it. It's worth exploring it. It's worth looking at how you can do it. I would also say that communication styles, is can be a real barrier, and potentially comfort with technology is also there, and I guess that can lead to a bit of misunderstanding and frustration, and that's something that you need to work on, and it's something that we work on a lot. We work on lots of opportunities. We've actually got a speaker coming out this afternoon. Shout out to Joe Muirhead from Canberra, who's coming along and doing some work with our teams, and I know that we will have a mix, a great cross-generational group of people that are coming to learn, and we'll all come in at different experience levels, and that's quite okay. But I guess, that's important. We have to invest in building a culture of trust. We have to invest in building a culture of mutual learning, shared purpose. It has to be there. And remember that all of those barriers that are there, they can actually be transformed into an opportunity for growth. That is absolutely possible. But it does take a willingness to reimagine traditional roles. And that's really important.
Absolutely. And I think it really is that it's not a quick fix. It's not an overnight thing. And I love what you said. If you put something in, you've got to take something out. And I know at our Future of Education Summit last year, we had a whole panel discussion talking about navigating the teacher shortage and battling burnout within our education systems and within our education communities. And I think that's where we're seeing some communities get really stuck, where it's just been one thing on top of another, on top of another, on top of another for staff. And those expectations have just kept piling up. And that's really where the burnout is starting. So I think it's really a great message for you to share as an education leader to other leaders out there, saying, if you're going to add something in, you've got to take something out. You've got to have that intentionality there from the very beginning.
And don't think that I'm perfect, that I'm not at all. I know that that's something that we have to work on, and we have to take feedback. And look, you've got diverse perspective with that, Scott, because everybody has something that they value highly. I always say it's like when you look at your timetable, you look at your calendar and you say, all right, well, everyone's feeling exhausted. Everyone's really busy. We've got to skim this down a bit. But of course, everyone agrees with that concept. Everyone's mad for that idea, except if it's their thing that you're going to pull out. If it's their passion project, that's going to be the thing that gets taken out. So that's back to communication, right? Always back to communication. And I guess that's when you have perspective clash, and you've really got to work through that. So I'm going to throw it back at you. In business and entrepreneurship, your bread and butter, how do you manage moments where generational perspectives clash? So what are some maybe strategies that you've used?
That's a really good question. And I find it really interesting because I must admit for myself, I'm a Gen Z. The majority of my team are Gen Z, yet we find the majority of our clients in the education system and in the corporate sector are all Gen X and baby boomers. So it's really, I think, quite fascinating for us as a team how we communicate with each other and how we collaborate with each other, and then how we communicate with clients and collaborate with clients can be quite different. And I think there's a lot of education we always are having to do with our team, just making sure that we are being understanding and having that respect, having that, I guess, that understanding of where people are coming from. But I think it is interesting. It's around understanding people's motivations. And I know Gen Z, they cop a lot of flack for being that sort of dopamine, instant gratification generation. And it is true. Like, we have grown up with social media. If I'm on TikTok and I see a video that I don't like, that's not bringing me a lot of joy, I just have to swipe up and I've got another video there in a split second. So we're used to those constant dopamine hits. And I think when it comes to that, everyone has some form of that. We all are a little addicted to our phones, even though we try to pretend we're not. And I think it's about understanding what each generation values. Like you just mentioned before, everyone has their thing. And for me, something I always love to do is get people to take a love languages test. Now, I know love languages, we typically talk about that in a setting with relationships, and particularly relationships with significant others. But there are some great love language tests you can do with your team in a corporate setting. And it's really just understanding how everyone likes to be appreciated. For some team members, it might be words of affirmation. You just have to sit them down and say, hey, I really appreciate the work you did. You went above and beyond on that project. Others, it's gifts. And it doesn't need to be pay rises and promotions and things like that. It can be something as simple as, hey, I got you a Coke Zero. Like, I really appreciate you going above and beyond or staying back late yesterday. got you a little Coke Zero to say thank you. Others, it's acts of service. It can be taking something off their plate or giving them an early finish. It doesn't need to be big things. So I think it's firstly figuring out what motivates the people that you're working with. And if you are managing a team, potentially even with those Gen Zs, they're not expecting pay rises. They're not expecting promotions every 30 seconds. And they don't want a pat on the head every hour or two. It's sometimes just figuring out what's their love language, how do they like to be appreciated, and as a manager, working that into your management styles. But I think when it comes to generational perspectives clashing, it comes down to what you said. It's those communication techniques, and it's the different approaches the generations take. Because every generation, I think it's important to understand, they approach their career and they approach their work in very different ways. If we look at baby boomers, they really value respect, and they really value that sort of more traditional hierarchy, and for good reason. They've been doing what they do for a really long time. They are incredibly seasoned, and they sort of command that respect, saying, look, I have been here for quite a while. They also really prefer in-person conversations. They like phone calls, they like meetings, and it's just understanding that that is their communication style. So when working with a baby boomer, that's sort of how we tailor our approaches. A Gen X, they're quite straightforward. They're quite to the point. They don't want to waste time. They want to get in, get out, get the job done, and get it done to a high standard. So they really prefer, they like phone calls, they like emails, and they're quite focused on that sort of efficiency. So it's saying, right, when we're dealing with Gen Xers, let's not bother with all of the niceties. Let's just get in, get out, get the job done, and not waste their time. The millennials, I think they're sort of like the chameleons of the generation. They can sort of bridge the Gen Zs all the way up to the baby boomers, and they really value progression. They're at that point in their career where they're wanting those pay rises, they're wanting those promotions, and they're really willing to work hard, but they want to get recognized and rewarded for that. They sort of bounce between. They don't mind an email, but they also don't mind a phone call. They'll do a bit of instant messaging. Like I said, they're a bit of a chameleon. And then those Gen Zs, they're very casual, they're very relaxed, but they value authenticity. For them, work is no longer a place where they just show up, they do the work, and then they leave. They want to feel valued. And for them, culture really is key. So it's about helping them feel seen, feel heard. They really like direct messaging. I know with most of the Gen Zs I work with, even any of my team, if I call them unprompted, it's probably going to go to voicemail. And even myself, if you call me without giving me a heads up, I'm probably going to send you to voicemail as well. So it's understanding that and just working with that. And they really value that authenticity. They also value that flexibility. So I think when it comes to generational perspectives clashing, it's really for myself, reminding myself, but also working with different teams around understanding, well, what generation is the person that you're working with? What do they value? What's their preferred communication method? And what matters to them? And tailor your approach to align with that a little better.
Yeah, I love that. So interesting thinking about each of those things. Firstly, don't ever buy me a Coke Zero as a gift. I only like things that sparkle. Secondly, and you know this, if you can say it in the subject line and there's nothing else, send that to me.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so true.
Yes. And lastly, I already know that I'm not supposed to call people that not only am I working with lots of Gen Z, but obviously I'm a parent of Gen Z too. So naturally, I had to download Snapchat just so as I could actually have any form of communication with my teens. So there you go, all over it.
Oh, you've got it nailed. But I think it's exactly that. And I actually think parents of Gen Z have got a really unique insight into how that generation are thinking. And again, it may be better than most at navigating that intergenerational collaboration, because you have to on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure you would have found, it always comes down to that understanding of saying, well, where are you coming from? What is the world you're growing up in? And how can I tailor my approach a little bit to meet you where you are? Now, Meagan, my next question for you actually comes back to the Future of Education Summit and what motivated you to collaborate with me to bring it to life. Now, I know when we met, I think I was still in high school, maybe had just finished. And when the idea for the summit came about, I was probably only 20, 21 years of age. So it was pretty fresh. I was pretty new. I didn't have any sort of education career under my belt. But for yourself, as a really seasoned and super accomplished education leader, I know I was super excited about the collaboration, but I'd love to understand your motivations for starting the initiative and working with me on that as a Gen Z.
Okay. So, look, what inspired me to actually co-found the Future of Education with you was absolutely, and it will always be my the reason why I do what I do is because I actually have a genuine belief that the future of education has to be shaped through intergenerational partnerships, because we look at our workforce, we look at education, and that's what it is. It's this whole range of people from different generations collaborating and interacting every day. And so to continue to grow and get better, we need to actually be able to model that. We need to show how it can be really done effectively. So Scott, you know this story, and maybe some people listening will know this, but I met you at an ISQ event, Independent Schools Queensland, where you were actually the guest speaker. And yes, you were a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed youngster. But I remember sitting there and listening to you and just being pretty blown away. I thought to myself as I was listening, there is so much that I could learn from this young guy. And I also think he's going to be a bit of a big deal. So I wouldn't mind being part of that. So I guess that's where our first coffee catch up started, and you know, the rest is history. But for me as an experienced leader, I've definitely seen how traditional systems can, even without meaning to, default to a top down decision making process. There is a risk that it unintentionally sidelines voices of the very people it's meant to serve, that being the students and early career professionals. And for me, your passion, your perspective, and that bold questioning that you bring to everything as a Gen Z entrepreneur offered me, I guess, exactly the kind of energy and insight that would really challenge me in meaningful ways. And I've definitely felt that over the years. I feel like you ask me such great questions. And sometimes in a traditional school environment, people that see themselves as not, you know, that you're higher up, that whatever, or however, I hate even saying that, but they don't necessarily challenge you. They don't necessarily question things. And I love the fact that you've always done that, because none of us can get better if we don't think about, you know, our practice, and we don't reflect, and we don't really have to articulate why it is we're doing something that we're doing. And I guess think about whether or not it is time to shift, or it is time to pivot to something new. So for me, I guess our partnership's really powerful because our generational perspectives complement each other. So I hope that I bring experience in navigating systems, and I guess leading change, and understanding like the complexities of educational leadership. But I know that you bring future focused mindset. I know that you bring a digital fluency and a deep commitment to innovation and equity that I've learned so much about through that. So for me, let's go back to what I talked about earlier with making sure that we balance our vision and our strategy. To me, that's so important. Just saying you have a vision is one thing, but what does it look like as your strategy, and how does it complement each other? So co-founding our summit wasn't just about launching an event. It wasn't ever going to be just about an event. It was really important for me to model what authentic collaboration could look like, not necessarily should look like, but could look like. And it proved that when we listen really deeply, when we challenge each other respectfully, and as we joked earlier, if only people could just record us chatting onto each other, they'd probably find it a little bit entertaining. But you know, we also know how to stay focused on our purpose and create something that neither of us could possibly create without each other. So there you go. Sorry, that was a very long way of answering that question, but I hope it does.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think it always comes down to, like you said, it's that trust and that respect. I think we come at challenges and we have conversations from such different perspectives. And whilst we have a fair bit of banter and can go back and forth on things for a while, it's always built on that foundation of trust, that we trust each other to want the best outcome for our attendees, for the project that we're working on, but also that mutual respect, that I think we both have a really strong shared respect for each other, our experiences, and our practice. And I think that is the key for every intergenerational collaboration. If you're going to have it, you've got to have that mutual trust and respect first, because everything grows off that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I guess, Scott, if you were to reflect on our summit experience, what key takeaways have you gained about bridging that generational gap that has meant that you've seen some meaningful change in education?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've seen so much change in education, even just in the past 10 years or so. And I think when it comes to the key takeaways around bridging those gaps is It's that understanding that great ideas can come from anywhere. And I think that's been really exciting, even as we've seen the Future of Education Summit come to life, is all of the presenters that we've had through our doors and featured on our program. And it's been everyone from executive principals down to pre-service teachers and early career teachers. And I think that's what I've found most exciting. And it's come from across subject areas. I think quite often there's that misconception that if you're talking about the future of education, you must be a STEM educator or an innovation specialist. But we've seen HAS teachers, we've seen home economics teachers, we've seen the absolute gamut of educators that are really exploring the future of education, and they are creating, and it's all impactful. And I think for me, it's realizing that it is a mindset. I think whilst we all have the year that we're born that classes us into a certain generation, it's the mindset that is the most important part. And I've met people that are technically baby boomers that I would say are more Gen Z than I am. I've even accepted that whilst I'm born in Gen Z, I'm probably a bit of a millennial. And I think it really is that mindset, and that's the really key part. And that mindset can be shifted and that can be changed. And I would say, Meagan, to yourself, that's something I've really respected from watching the work that you've done in the schools that I've seen you working in since we've started collaborating, is I've noticed that culture shift and I've noticed that mindset shift in every single education community you've gotten involved with over the past decade or so. And it really is building that culture and changing those mindsets. Because yes, whilst we might all come from different generations, your mindset is the most important part.
Yeah, I think so. And I love that. And I think it's exciting and it's interesting to learn about it. I love knowing what the young people that are around me all the time are talking about and what they're interested in. And whilst my TikTok feed might look really different than theirs, I still like learning about it. I'm excited about it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And speaking of getting to engage with these young people and hearing their thoughts, I guess my final question for you, Meagan, I'd love to know, what does your ideal intergenerational partnership look like in a school community? If you could design the perfect partnership between the generations in a school context, what would that look like?
Yeah, I spend lots of time thinking about this. To me, we've talked about these things already, right? So mutual respect, absolutely essential. Shared purpose has to be there. Structured opportunities for collaborating. It has to be planned. It has to be considered. I think that to build something ideal, it might involve students, staff, alumni, community members. So you've got all different opportunities to bring those people to be working side by side. Students, so important, and so many schools are doing this now, which I'm so incredibly excited about. And certainly at my school, Canterbury College, we are passionate about empowering our young people to contribute to decision making. And at some schools, that's leadership councils or advisory boards or whatever. We call it student parliament. And that's something that I'm really proud of. And our director of student development here has done an amazing job of building that up. But I guess that mentoring that can happen. So when students are mentored by experienced educators, and there's lots of opportunities to do that, but also by alumni. I guess what you've got to think about is making sure that those people are willing to listen more than they speak. And that's really important. But when we have staff from different generations that co-design programs, and you do that thing that we talked about earlier, which was pairing that innovation with wisdom, then I think that you see something really great. I guess experienced officer, you've got new teachers who are tech savvy and they think about things in an innovative way. But when you pair that with somebody experienced, then you've also got pedagogical depth, and pedagogical depth is so important. So, above all, I think partnerships need to be dynamic and they need to be reciprocal. So, every generation learning from the other means that all of those voices are valued equally. And that's how you actually shape a school to be ready for the future. And I think, as you just talked about earlier, that's how you shape the culture.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's exactly like you said, it's modeling it and modeling it from the top if you can. But even if you're not modeling it from the top, it's modeling it yourself, and being that first driver of change and showcasing those wins, because that's how you can convert those shift those mindsets and drag along those naysayers.
I think so. And the reality, Scott, is we're not perfect at it. Like I'm certainly not. I'm sure I make mistakes all the time in the way I do things, but being open to hear that and to reflect on it and to pivot again, to fail fast, and all of those skills that we know that we've got to have. Um, so my final one for you is, where do you think the future of intergenerational collaboration is heading? Especially considering rapid pace of technology and societal change?
That's a great question. And I think it's going to continue to change and change even faster and become even more important. Like, I think even if we just look at the next 10 years, it's expected that by 2035, 10 years' time, we're going to have 1 billion remote workers globally. That means that many of our young people will never have a 9 to 5 job where they're in an office. We're going to see over 50 billion smart devices connected around the world. So that's more technology in our schools, in our homes, in our communities. And we're seeing some really big shifts as far as technologies like the metaverse, the Apple Vision Pro, and extended reality totally transforming the way we connect with our devices. So I think we're living in a world where that rate of change is getting even faster. And I think we're seeing the divide between a generation grow. Even myself as a Gen Z, I'm born at sort of the earlier end of Gen Z. I look at those born at the other end of Gen Z, and they're thinking, they're working, they're connecting and collaborating in such different ways. And I think as we look at those Gen Alphas come through, where for many of them, the first language they learn to speak is not any spoken language, it's technology. It's that first thing they learn to communicate confidently with. We're going to see that shift again. So I see that in the future, intergenerational training is going to be mandatory for everyone, no matter your job. We all have things like workplace health and safety training and CPR training and all sorts of training for every single profession, particularly as educators. There's a lot of training and professional development that we have to do. I think we're going to see intergenerational collaboration become one of those mandated things that we all have to be doing every single year to stay on top of it, because I don't think it's a nice to have anymore. I think it's essential for any team looking to succeed and thrive in this ever changing future. So I think the earlier leaders and teams can get onto it, can lean into it, and start upskilling themselves, building those experiences, building the skills and the mindset to be able to do it and do it collaboratively. I think they're the ones that are going to really be leading the pack in the next 10 years' time.
Amazing.
I know. It's exciting. But I am conscious of time. I know that it is always a busy time of year in schools at the moment. And I know our audience have all got probably 100 things that they've got to do on their to-do list. So I think we might wrap that conversation up for today. But I just wanted to thank all of our audience for joining us and leaning into this important discussion.
Yeah, and I hope if there's one thing everyone takes away from our chat today, it is that intergenerational collaboration isn't just valuable, but it's actually essential. So remember what we've talked about a couple of times: combining wisdom with new ideas actually is when we create space for real innovation and change to happen.
Absolutely. And it's not about one generation handing over the reins and throwing everything they've done out the window. It's about building a future together, side by side. And that future starts with conversations, it starts with trust, and it starts with a shared commitment to learning from each other.
Yeah, cool. So over to you now, guys. We're really excited to see how you will continue your collaborations in your own schools, workplaces, and communities. And thank you again. We look forward to seeing what we can all create together. Don't forget that tickets are now on sale for the Future of Education Summit 2025, which will be held here at the beautiful Canterbury College campus. And that event is on the 24th and the 25th of July for our main program. Hope to see you there.
Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful afternoon.